up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative, where today we're gonna go over my top 10 favorite reads from the first quarter of this year. And my 10 picks that I'm going to talk about today are just books. I read 34 books January through March. I read 5 short story collections, 2 comics, 1 novella, and 1 novelette. I also am not counting any books that are rereads. I'm rereading the Dresden Files again this year, as well as The Wheel of Time, and there's been a few other odds and ends rereads that I squeezed in here and there. I'm not counting any of those. These are all new books to me. These are in no particular order. I did not go so far as to rank them number 1 top read down to 10. These are just the 10 books that I have loved the most in the first quarter of the year. Beginning with a book that I read in January, The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. I can't get over, this is his debut novel, and I check periodically to see if he's writing anything else, when I might can get my hands on it. This is absolutely one of my most favorite thrillers I have ever read. This is what I look for in a thriller. It was amazing. I could not put it down. I flew through it. I was obsessed. The atmosphere, the intrigue, getting the story of this patient. Oh, so good. It's a supernatural thriller too. And I was just shocked at how much I love that, because sometimes authors don't nail the endings for supernatural thrillers. If you're going to have a supernatural story, I want a good ending. Don't cheese it up for me. And the way that Jasper DeWitt did this ending, perfection. Cannot recommend this one enough. Next up on this list is Richard Osman's The Thirsty Murder Club. This one is actually in process of being made into a major motion picture, and I will be going. The Thirsty Murder Club is a group of senior citizens that live in a retirement village. Every Thursday they come together to look over some cold case files that they're not supposed to have, and they try to solve the murder, or at least they solve the murder amongst their group in a way that makes them feel that it's solved. Harmless fun until an actual murder happens that is close to them. I just loved this one so very much. I will tell you, I started out, I read the first 5 chapters and I put it down. I wasn't connecting to the story. Well, my hold from my library came through for the audiobook. I started it over with the audiobook. Again, I do not remember the name of the audiobook narrator, but she was so good. She made this. So I started over from the beginning with her, and then immersion read and just flew through, and it became one of my favorite reads of the year, and I'm trying my best to squeeze the next 2 in before the 3rd book comes out in September. Fantastic. Just good fun. It also made me feel good to know that even when I get this age where I might need to live in a retirement home or a retirement village, I can still have fun. I can still make meaningful friendships and have fun. So thank you, Richard Osman, for giving me hope for my golden years. Next on the list, this is not going to surprise anybody. Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the 2nd book in the Lake Witch trilogy. I love the author took a different approach to writing this one. If he had written it the same way the first one was written, I think the story, the trilogy, would have lost a little bit of its magic. It's definitely a level up on the slasher element in this one. There were a couple of really great moments in this one where you just want to stand up in your chair, throw your fist in the air, and be like, yes, yes. It was so good. I need this to be adapted, but I need Stephen Graham Jones to make sure they don't screw it up. I am incredibly excited for the finale for this trilogy, but this one was amazing. Next up on the list, okay, this is book 3 in the series, and I love the whole series so far. I've read the first 5 books. The series is called Book of Thrice Dead. This particular one, book 3, is Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I had to pick this one. While most of them are 5-star reads, maybe they're all 5-star reads. I have to go back and look. This one, when I read it, the sheer genius of the author floored me. This is a post-apocalyptic horror series that involves the multiverse, and this is where I first really got a grip on what was going to be happening here and how the multiverse was involved. It was amazing. It was mind-bending. I just couldn't believe what was happening. And this became my favorite book by the author. So not only is it one of my favorite books that I've read in the first quarter of this year, it's my favorite book by this author, and I have read many Joseph Sell books. So I'm not just saying this because I've read 3 books. I think by the time I read this one, I had read 7, maybe? Feels right. Maybe 8. At any rate, this is an amazing book. It's the 3rd in the series. I would love to tell you about it, but first I would have to tell you about books 1 and 2. I've got reviews that will be linked in the cards above if you want to check that out. I'll put a playlist for Joseph Sell's work down there as well. Amazing, absolutely amazing. So the first 4 books I've talked to you about, we have a thriller, we've got a murder mystery, we've got horror, and Joseph's book is sci-fi, dark fantasy, horror blend. This is my first fantasy book we're going to talk about, and it is a self-published fantasy novel by Kobe Zucker, another debut. It is a chunker. It does look like it's a romance novel. It's not. This is one of the best fantasy stories I have read. I am so excited for when Kobe gets book 2 ready. Kobe, if you happen to be watching this, please do not feel pressured. Take your time. I know you took your time with this one. You wrote it so methodically. It is beautiful. This book to me is very reminiscent of how I felt the first time I read the Wheel of Time series back in the mid-90s. The world building is done beautifully. It's done slowly over time as characters are traveling here and there. You meet different types of people, what they mean to each other. You have one group that's colonized another, and how they try to live with that on both sides of it, how they work together, what they think of each other. There are different gods that these groups of people believe in, and how that's explored and shown. It's so good. Catalyst that kicks off our story. Nomads of the sea. These are people that used to live on the sea. They moved around. They did not reside on land. As time has passed, there are some that have attached their boats to land. They have some of their buildings on land. And one of the tribes that is determined to get back to the old ways, they've started attacking these other tribes for doing that. They're trying to force them back onto the sea. So the license who colonized these people years prior have sent a contingent to help some of the tribes to quash the rebellion. And one of the characters that comes along with the license, she's a scholar and she's learning about these nomads. So we learn with her. We learn about their culture, their gods, and their magic. It's so good. Even though it's a chunk, it reads incredibly fast. And then the last one that I have here in physical format, I have Kuiper Station by Wilbur Seymour. This is another self-published science fiction novel. This one leans harder into the sci-fi element. So if you're someone who, when you pick up a science fiction book, you want to have some technology, you want it to be in space, spaceships, space battles, space pirates, this is one for you. My favorite thing about this book was the friendship between Bob and the artificial intelligence of the decommissioned space station, Kuiper Station. When Bob was 16, he hacked into the AI and he made it better, self-aware, and named her Candy. And they are best friends, and the banter is hilarious. Even though I did not like him in the beginning, when I started seeing the layers that the author was revealing to this guy over the course of this novel, I became fascinated. I wanted to know more about Bob. Even though I learned a lot about him, I wanted to know more, which I absolutely got when I read the sequel, and I'm about to read the 3rd book in this series. So that's how that one ended up on the list. And the last few books I read digitally, starting with Echoes of Another Earth by J. Daniel Layfield. This was a book that I read as part of the self-published science fiction competition. If I was the one handing out the trophy for the winner, I would have handed it to J. Daniel Layfield with this one. I absolutely loved this book. It's a standalone science fiction novel about the main character, Josh, who has a target on his back by the universe, the galaxy, the cosmos. He wakes up and he is Josh. And then something happens to bring about the end of the world, and he is pulled out of that Josh. He goes into something, someplace, until he is put into another Josh on a different Earth. So is it the multiverse? Is it a parallel universe? Like, what's going on? All I know is this opens up with Josh realizing the end of the world is coming yet again. Can you imagine that kind of existence? knowing you may have days or weeks before the end of the world comes and you're put inside another you somewhere else somehow. He has no idea how this is happening, and the only thing he can think of to do to survive with some level of sanity is just live that Josh's life according to how that Josh lived it. Until the one Josh on the one earth. It was so good. This one made me laugh so much. No matter where Josh ended up and whatever Josh he ended up in, he always had the same best friend, Dave. And Dave just stole the page anytime he was on it. I was living for Dave. This one made me cry. I was so upset to find out that this was not the beginning of a series. This was a standalone. But the good news is J. Daniel Layfield has written several other books, which I've got ready to go as soon as I finish up with some of these competitions that I'm judging for. I can't wait to read this author's backlog. The next one, I am about to shock some folks here because of my past with this author. How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I would have never in a million years thought I would put Grady Hendrix on any type of favorite list. I've really enjoyed some of his books, but there's been a lot of them that were just okay for me. I loved this book. Now, the first 30%, I thought I was going to DNF it, but my goodness, when the author really hit his stride with the main theme of this story, it was so good. I can close my eyes and just remember how some of those pages reading it, the atmosphere came through and bled over into my reality and had me scared sitting in this house. I was like, oh my goodness. It was a delicious type of fear. I just love when an author can make me feel that way when I'm reading a haunted house story or just a horror in general. I had a fantastic time with this story. You know, I thought I would never reread this one. I didn't buy it. I borrowed it from my library, but now I'm thinking I might kind of would like to reread it and see if I'm able to recapture that first time feel reading it with learning about this house and the siblings. I would absolutely skip the first 30% though. I'm going to end the last two with fantasy. The first one is Army of the Curse by Karim Solomon, and this book came out of nowhere. I love this book so much that when I wrote the review and put it on Amazon, I saw that the second book was already written and it was on Kindle Unlimited. I immediately downloaded it and started it right then. I can't tell you the last time that I read back-to-back 2 books in the same series. I just don't do that. I don't like to do that. I like to have a little bit of breathing space so I can make sure that I keep them separate and I don't lump one in with the other. Just give it its fair shot. Okay, and also because I hate one series in. I'm in the middle of probably 50 to 60 series because I don't want to read the end. I don't like endings. If the third book in this trilogy had been out as well, I would have read all 3 back-to-back. Amazing. I think what I love most about this one is the fear. What are they going to do? How are these people going to be able to come together to fight an unkillable foe? That's even if these people can stop fighting each other long enough to band together against these demons that are coming to kill them, these immortal foes. And for those of you who don't mind completing series and you don't like starting a series until all the books are out, I believe the author is very close to having the 3rd book completed. He told me he put me on his ARC team, so I am dying to get my hands on that one and see how this one's going to end. The last book on this list. Now, this one is probably cheating, but I read it in the first quarter, so I'm going to count it in the first quarter, even though it was an ARC and it doesn't come out until July. That is the Judas Blossom by Stephen Arion. It's a historical fantasy. I've not read a whole lot of historical fantasy. I wasn't sure how it was going to hit me, but you know, I've always said when I read horror, I like for these stories to have a nugget of truth. Something that perhaps happened in the author's life that they built a story around, like Michael Clark in The Patience of a Dead Man. The house that's featured in that one, the haunted house, is a house the author and his family lived in when he was younger. If I like my horror stories to have a nugget of truth, then the same should be true for fantasy. And the Judas Blossom is about the Mongol Empire and their just cancerous overtaking of all of the land around them, how they're just determined to take over the world. What I love most about this is Stephen Arion used actual people who existed. One that was my favorite, he used her because there wasn't a whole lot of information given about her. And that character just became a playground for Stephen Arion to do whatever he liked with her. And what he did was just, I loved it, just ate it up. What I really enjoyed about this book is it made me hungry to learn more about the history of the Persians and the Mongols. As soon as I finished this book, I was hitting up Wikipedia and anything I could find just to read about this history and more about these characters, which ones actually existed, which were fiction. Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, he took it a step further and looked up pictures of these people, and then we just had a really good time laughing over how they really looked and how we pictured them from reading the book. It is an amazing story, and here's what I'm going to tell you. As soon as I get the finished copy in my hands, I'm going to reread it immediately. This is one of those you get to the end, you instantly want to reread it because there's just so much. And I know I missed some stuff because I was so focused on what was my favorite aspects and elements that I know I missed some stuff. So I want to go back and reread it again. And yes, I'm going to do it even though when the next book comes out next year or the year after, I'll reread it again. You know, it's one of those that just has that kind of rereadability. When an author is able to take a subgenre that I do not reach for on purpose, I do not purposely seek out historical fiction, and you make me love it, that is what earned it its spot in my top 10 reads of Q1. Which one of these books do you all think will make it to the end of the year as possibly being a top 5 read or the top book of 2023? Put your predictions down in the comments below. This will be fun to see how that shakes out. Share with me your favorite reads from the first part of the year. I would love to chat about it. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.